Hi there, I'm Thomas Jarlow, the CEO and founder of CxPlanner, the fastest commissioning software ever built. In this little demo here, I will show three main concepts. Let's dive into it. The first one here, that is goodbye to all the legacy ways to do commissioning. So whether you're having Excel, Word, or using a complex software, bring your data, then with one click, you can load it directly into CxPlanner. So one click, and then you're up and running. The second parameter here, that is our practical design. So on the right side here, you can see a mobile and a tablet, and that is what CxPlanner actually looks like. We have a concept where we're dynamically adapting the user interface for the users. So for the subcontractor, no like bloated options or extra buttons, only what they actually need to do. So we're keeping everything simple, fast, and practical. The last one here, that is our scope of the platform. I have like 6 screenshots here showing some of the different modules. So whether you're going to use like a single timeline, doing checklists or annotations in the submittals or snagging, whatever you need to do, we've got you covered. You're just going to enable that single module or multiple modules, and then the platform will scale to that automatically. So jump in on our website, book a meeting. I would love to show you the platform. Perfect. Have a good one.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cassie with AABC, and I'd like to welcome you to today's Tab Talk webinar. I also want to thank our sponsor, CxPlanner, for supporting this session. Just a few items to cover before we get started today. Our presenters will hold questions until the end of their presentation, but we encourage you to submit your questions at any time using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you happen to be experiencing technical problems during the webinar, please use the chat function to inform the panelists so that our producer, Sim, can assist you. This presentation is being recorded and it will be available for viewing in 1 week. In terms of continuing education credit, everyone in attendance for the full webinar will receive a certificate of attendance sent to their email within 24 hours. And finally, if you're a certified TBE or TBT, your CEUs for attending this webinar will be automatically uploaded to your portal after the webinar. Our webinar today is Tab Best Practices from the ACG Building Systems Commissioning Guideline. I'd like to welcome our speakers for today, Jeremy Johnson of American Testing and Jim Magee of MACx Consulting. Jim and Jeremy, thanks for being here today. The floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Cassie. I'm going to go ahead and switch the screen over. And good afternoon, Jeremy. Well, we can start off by introducing ourselves. Why don't you tell us about yourself and ATI and what's going on?
Thanks, Jim. Pleasure doing this webinar with you. Cassie, thank you as well. Been with American Testing for a couple years now. I'm certified CXA TBE, and I'm also Zone 1 Vice President of the Board of Directors for the AABC. So when it comes to being involved and being part of this commissioning tab community, I'm definitely involved and definitely want to share what I have to offer, and as well as hopefully learn some down the way. So just appreciate the opportunity and look forward to speaking with you, Jim.
I've taken the tab and then commissioning route myself. I spent 17 years, started with Thermal Balance in Lexington, Kentucky. I was a TBE. Then when we formed Facility Commissioning Group, we later had a test and balance company called Synergy that still operates in Indianapolis. So I worked a little with them. And then I spent 25 years doing commissioning for Facility Commissioning Group. I'm currently doing Max Consulting, which is a consulting company for commissioning providers and people seeking commissioning teams and services. So let's get right into it. The outline here, you can see what we're talking about. We've introduced ourselves. I want to talk about the guideline, and then I also want to talk about a little bit about the national standards, specifically about commissioning. And then Jeremy and I are going to talk a lot about the cornerstones of commissioning. Test and balance is one of those cornerstones for the building systems commissioning process, because it ensures that HVAC systems achieve their design intent and that they operate at peak efficiency. And HVAC systems really affect more than just themselves. They affect almost all the other systems in the building. So it's a crucial part of what we do in the commissioning process. For years, AABC has talked about total system balance as an element and as HVAC commissioning. I ascribe pretty much to that. We want you all to understand what some of the things that tab requirements are during design and construction. The rest of this article that was produced in the tab journal is on the ACG guidelines, so we'll talk about that. Takeaways, we should be able to identify why qualifications-based commissioning selection, which Jeremy's going to talk about, is important. What are things that tab contractors do in design phase? What do they do in the construction phase? And what are some good practices on tab verification? The way Jeremy and I set this up is it's going to be sort of a Q&A sort of thing where I bring what is in the ACG guideline and a commissioning perspective, and I quiz Jeremy on his interactions with commissioning providers as a tab firm, and we go that route. We have 6 primary topics. If there's time permitted, we have 4 others, and then we're going to give you some earth-shattering conclusions about the ACG commissioning.
I love it.
Guideline. Go ahead. What'd you say, Jeremy?
No, I said I love it. Let's do it.
Let's do it. The ACG Building System Commissioning Guideline it presents best practices and details on commissioning specific types in buildings. It's a new publication that offers insights and strategies. It's totally electronic, available to members and also available to subscribers. Building owners largely can subscribe for free. The excerpt that was in the tab journal comes out of the volume 1. Part 1 is the commissioning process itself. Part 2 is where we apply that to different applications. Volume 1 is completely complete now, and part 2, volume 2, is in progress, and then volume 3 will be special methods. We talk about best practices, and the guideline is written for commissioning providers to help people learn how to do commissioning in a detailed way. A word about the AABC national standards, and the big word is the 7th edition has been out for a long time. And when Cassie wraps this up, she may be able to give a better timeline, but I know the 8th edition is nearing publication. And the thing about that is the chapter 26 on HVAC commissioning has been updated. It referenced, well, it was written before there was a commissioning standard, which is the ASHRAE standard 202. And now there's actually an existing building commissioning standard as well, ASHRAE standard 230. And AABC publishes incredible education opportunities through webinars and seminars and meetings, publications and training, all of which you see here, some of the highlights of what they have on that program. But the national standards is really key to the difference what AABC is compared to other test and balance associations and the concept of total system balance, which Jeremy and I'll get into a little bit. So again, TAB as a cornerstone. We really advocate for the qualifications based selection of tab agencies. To point out in the discussion, ASHRAE looks at 4 phases of commissioning: project initiation, design, construction, occupancy, and operations. We've really not mentioned much about project initiation relative to tab because tab's usually not hired at best in the design phase and typically not until construction. Commissioning process provider group is what a CxPg is, and that's not the commissioning team, but the people providing the commissioning service, their group. That's called the CxPg. And you know, the key is, and I didn't appreciate this, Jeremy, when I was actually in the field, but we show up at the crux of the whole project, right? It's crunch time when our services are being done. A lot of times we're behind schedule. And it just makes this whole communication, field reports, tab reports, verification, so much more crucial because everything is under a lot of pressure and stress. So the AABC question number 1, Jeremy, that we can take up. The question is, explain the role of the tab in building systems commissioning. Why AABC certified TBEs and TBTs, and you can tell us what those are strongly positioned to participate on commissioning team, and why qualifications-based tab agency selection is crucial to tab delivery. So that's 3 questions in 1, Jeremy. So we'll start you out.
We got enough time here to cover all this?
My 6 questions are really 15.
All right. Let's get into this. So, thank you, Jim. As far as AABC certified TBEs, TBTs, right? TBT is a test and balance technician, right? We're talking about, you know, a person that probably has a few years experience, able to sit through, successfully complete, the AABC technician training manual. And certified TBEs are, another level. Typically those people probably have 5+ years experience, maybe 10 years experience, something like that. Depends on maybe what region you're in. But these are the TBTs, are the field level people that are certified, understand the processes, are quizzed at the processes, and are capable of doing the processes at a very high level, repetitive level. And TBEs are your supervisor, so to speak, of the testing and balancing that goes on for the projects. And both of those elements are very critical in how they participate with the CX teams. The TBTs, their job on a construction project with the team might be with your commissioning field technician, right, Jim?
Yeah.
And your TBE might be working with your CXA, which might be going to more meetings and that kind of stuff. Every project's a little different, but that's kind of how the roles can be. Ultimately, getting everybody kind of together, and I'm not sure if I'm jumping ahead too far on streamlining some of those processes, but a lot of times it's what vehicle can we use most effectively and efficiently to go through the tab and commissioning process, right? We know we always have a commissioning meeting. Sometimes there's a tab meeting. We've had really good luck over the years with projects that we can actually kind of bring both of those into the same room at the same time. Whether it's, the onset of the test and balance process, onset of commissioning, and those situations and that type of open dialogue and open communication, I think, can be really beneficial. Ideally, we would love to have the tab contractors, the tab agencies being owner procured, the commissioning agency owner procured as well. That allows for really seamless open communications. Hate to say it, but when we go through traditional contracting, sometimes sometimes stuff can be slowed down, right? And the process and how it gets to where it needs to go. But the qualifications of the tab agency, it is very critical, right? AABC, we talk about independence, right? What does independence give you? Independence gives you non-biased testing, where, an ABC company, ABC agency, is going to perform the testing, per the standards, upheld with, integrity, quality. And not that you can't get that other places, but it's one of those things. It's kind of the cornerstone. It is the cornerstone of the ABC, is the independence.
Well, too, AABC is unique in that they warranty, the association warranties the projects of the members.
Absolutely. That's something out there, and we don't have to dive into maybe exactly what kind of warranty you get right with it, but there is a check and a balance involved in the system, and the association has a process in which if an owner is unhappy with the results they get, obviously that can get complicated. I know we're going to talk about tab verification a little bit here, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the details of what you get with tab verification and commissioning, and kind of some of the, I don't know, I got some tips and tricks, and I got some things that we've been successful at over the years, and how it can help everybody, right?
I'm going to ask you some of that too. So, when we first met, the two first things out of your mouth when I asked you about tab relative to commissioning were team approach and qualifications-based selection. So those two are prime, and we'll talk more about team. But a couple of things about qualifications. Obviously you have the certification programs for technicians and engineers, but you also have the total system balance concept, which
Sure.
is much more extensive evaluation of equipment operation and controls than you're going to necessarily get from a typical tab contractor. But we can talk about some of that some more too, because there are advantages and ways that AABC really molds into the independent third-party direct for owner commissioning concept. And that independence is from AABC. That's why ACG adopted it.
Absolutely.
Let's see if I can advance these slides. Been on the slide so long, it doesn't want to move. All right, cue number 2. Describe the ideal tab project integration during the design phase and the challenges that persist in practice. If it were me answering this from my 17 years, I would say what design phase participation, but tell me.
Well, and in an ideal world, integration during the design phase and challenges that persist. When we're talking about the design phase, right, we're talking about a lot of times the word balanceability comes in to play. And I don't know if that's a made up word, if that's in dictionary or not, but that's like a slang
That's
that
an
we've used,
AABC word, and I was going to
right?
literally put
Right.
you
It's
on the
about
spot and make you define it. If Galen were here,
balanceability.
I'd have him do it, but it's on you.
Balanceability. It is the ability to successfully balance the system, right? In the short term, valves,
But it doesn't mean your
dampers.
ability, does it? It doesn't mean your ability to balance.
No. It means the design ability, the design installation, the design, I'm going to call them components, right? Dampers, valves, right? At locations, every once in a while, you're going to get this kind of design that's this hybrid approach, and you got half pressure dependent, half pressure independent, right? And then you
Or
have
we
to
have a
say,
damper, but there's no way to lock it down or set it right.
well, that's
Dampers
true
are not
too,
created equal.
right? Or every once in a while you might see some dampers installed in a medium pressure VAV system. And you're like,
Yes.
why are these dampers here? These dampers are going to cause more problems than good. Delete them, get them out, don't need them, right?
So this is what you're going to look for in the design phase if someone lets you.
Absolutely. We're also going to look at system diversity, right? We're going to be another set of eyes to determine what the system diversity number is. And in the days, in the times right now of DOE, energy, conservation, right? Government initiatives, it's all around us, right? Diversity it's there. And those calculations, those numbers, how we're going to balance the system, how we're going to balance the building, it's really paramount to get that information out now, because if we're getting a job and we're not hitting some of this, I'm going to call it, QA/QC, if you want to call it too, right? Where we're actually another set of eyes looking at something as far as how it's practical to balancing how we are going to overcome things, or how do we eliminate or mitigate as many challenges and adversities? How do we minimize tab action list or issue logs or resolution logs or whatever you want to call them, right? How do we minimize that so when we get to the balancing part of the job, right, there's things that we can look at and see ahead of time, and this is an experience related thing too. So I mean, for me, those are ideal project integration moments.
Tell us how this really works. Like, are you getting the job in the design phase and you're getting to do all this before it even bids? Are you getting the job when it bid, but you have some time to make up the design work in that interim? Or are you usually getting a job right at the time when they want you there during
I mean,
startup?
I think we
Tell us,
get a
I mean,
mixed.
I know it was all over the place, but what's typical?
We get a mixed bag, right? I mean, we get it from very early on, basically, that we're taking dirt out of the ground and we're involved in the phase, and we're getting it somewhere in a 50% rough in construction phase, something like that, and then we're getting the job at the end. So each one's a little different, but ultimately it's about fulfilling your TAP specifications 230593 and what's also included in there. And depending on what time you're brought in, who you're working with, even if you get into a TAP submittal phase, sometimes you might be a little late on actually making a difference too. And I've found that too, that even if you're doing your diligence, you're like, oh yeah, well that's already done, that's already installed, or hey, we've already covered up the ceiling or whatever, and you're like, okay, well, I mean, that didn't, so the timing of all of it is critical. It's paramount with a lot. Obviously, the construction schedule timeline overall, right? It has so many little pieces to it. Getting the timing right, especially with tab, can save headaches and occupancy issues down the road, right? Turnover is one of the big things, right? How do we get the project turned over, right? How do we get substantial completion? Not having a building that can be balanced properly or have issues, right? I mean, those are things that keep the building from getting occupied, right, Jim?
So are most of your jobs are probably don't have commissioning scope, but the ones that do, tell us that. And then also on the ones that do, are you getting that call from the commissioning guy? Hey, this is Joe, commissioning dude, was glad to work for you. Or are you just meeting them for the first time at the first progress meeting you go to?
I mean, it depends. I mean, we definitely have a mixed bag of things that we're involved with. As far as like formal commissioning processes, and I'll speak to that degree as far as like if you have a formal commissioning process, and you're a tab contractor coming into a job. So yeah, your coordination meetings or your commissioning meetings is sometimes where the tab agency is brought in, and piggybacked into the commissioning process and piggybacked into getting some of that stuff on the schedule with the tab schedule, right? It's some of the time that we kind of do that. It's best practices to get that type of involvement with the tab and commissioning process going. Sometimes having too many meetings, having a tab meeting, have a commissioning meeting, sometimes it just becomes kind of too much.
Meetings on top of meetings on top of meetings.
Yeah, I mean, my personal take is if you have a commission meeting, you have a frequent schedule, bringing the tab contractor in to understand, what he's going to be able to do, what he can do, and what his process is going to be, because the commissioning requisite is going to be right there after his, most likely. And then speaking on that too, right? I mean, a lot of people, and maybe the way things are written in by the book, you want to do things where, hey, look, commissioning guy Jim, you've been in a position before. Give me the tab report. Where's the tab report? I can't start commissioning until I have the tab report, or it's a requirement, right? So, those are kind of real world challenges that I run across and face. And I think there's ways that you can do it respectfully, with integrity and honesty, and still get the same result, right?
Yeah,
and,
we'll talk about some of that too on streamlining.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead a little bit there.
You're doing good. We're rolling right on. Let's go to query number 3.
Okay.
And then this is where you get into a distinction too between the TSB and the typical tab company. But what are your responsibilities during the construction phase? You have tab plans, startup, controls coordination, commissioning team support. These are all things that, and then you have to deliver field reports too. And, I think it's real important that, this get integrated in a way that you're not just a tree falling in the forest. You know what I mean? The information that you come out with is crucial. And, the TSB has, this whole series of different kinds of plans. There's of course, you have an engineer that's on top of the job, but then you have a TSB report format that's supposed to be out, a TSB plan, which includes HVAC procedures, the TSB interface with the mechanical, electrical, and specialty contractors, construction plans and specs, where you integrate the scheduling, and then field observations and field. And on top of that, anything that has to do with special inspections like duct testing, maybe clean room testing. Oh, wow. Do you deliver all that on every job? I mean, like you said, there's so much information, man.
There is. Let's start off by a couple just basic tab plans. Let's talk about, strategies and procedures, right? What does that look like, right? I mean, that's basically like a procedure, or like a executive summary overview can be best described on how I'm going to balance the system, right? What kind of system is it? Define it. Are we constant volume? Are we variable volume? Are we hybrid? What's our diversity? What's our approach? Are we going to start at the unit? Are we going to start at the terminal units? Are we going to rough it in? Are we going to just go ahead and go right to final tab? What's the step by step, right? That's a good foundation to start with, but ultimately, as you get into it, sometimes you also have to develop niche plans as a result of the construction phase, right? Balancing world, right? 101, right? We balance by system, right? Jim, they don't build the building and turn it over by system, do they?
This is crucial too. You talked earlier about integrating with the commissioning, and it's the same thing. We don't necessarily have to have an entire building if we can start with complete systems.
Exactly.
And come back around to the holistic part of it. But what kills you is the phasing that, divides it up, adds dampers and so forth. I totally get that.
And I think you can look at it too from a perspective of when you have independent systems, when you have independent, chill water system, control valves, auto flows, air terminal units, right? And they rely on pressure. They rely on pressure in the air duct systems and pressure in the water systems, differential pressure. And that's a gauge of potential, right? If you can establish that potential on a building and you can phase balance it, you can be very successful in overcoming challenges of tab and commissioning with that approach. Because doing it step by step and doing it like in the order of, as you would want to do it, sometimes I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's very challenging. And bringing those type of thoughts to the table, and then, I think it's an open mind too. I think it's an open mind from a commissioning and the contracting team as well, to understand what the goals are and how we're going to work around and achieve those goals.
So how do you get to it? I mean, you write a tab plan. Does that tab plan include startup participation? Does it include calibrating controls? And how do you have money in there to do some of these things, even the design phase stuff?
Yeah, that's the great question there. Startup participation, sometimes it's required, sometimes it's not. I'm going to say a lot of times it's either not or doesn't get executed. But, it is one of those things where, a tab or a CX person can have a perspective about startup and things that logically make sense when equipment is started up. And when you start up equipment, there's expectations that you should have. Not that it's on and it's running and okay, it's got air, here you go. What kind of air do you have? What kind of stack pressure do you have? Are you under control when you're starting up equipment? Are you just bumping fans and doing rotation and walking away from it, letting it eat?
When I commission hydronic systems, Jeremy, it's hard to imagine, but the vast majority of mechanical contractors do not establish pressurization control in their hydronic systems. They don't get the right expansion tank pressure. They don't put things on the low point of suction side. It's crazy, and sometimes guys balance them that way.
We got, there's 3 F's of hydronic systems. It's filled, flush, free of air. Filled and free of air kind of could be the same thing construed of, but the bottom line is getting these systems filled correctly, right? And I think in tab we're not brought in, or we're not involved enough with that, my honest opinion. I think people that, and I'm not gonna totally hopefully bash the industry too bad, but people that really know how to flush and fill systems, I feel like there's less of them out there than there was 10 or 15 years ago.
Really on a high.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I hate to go there, but that's how I feel.
On a heat pump system, you're forced to bring in, a test stand and actually flush the system and flush the field and then put them together. A normal hydronic system, you don't do that. It's almost like you get a better install when you're doing a heat pump system because there's a geothermal field involved,
Sure.
Because that's one way the tab guy's always out. But when I'm doing a startup on any other, whether it's a chiller or a big cooling tower system, you don't need any balancing on those when you start them up. Condenser water flow. What's the big?
No, but there is something, I think, overseeing the practices of certain startup too that can be beneficial to the process too.
Absolutely.
Especially people that have knowledge and experience related to things to look out for. Right,
yeah.
Hydronic system not being flushed properly can be an absolute disaster for a tab contractor, because he's going equipment by equipment, punching out, finding strainers clogged, finding ports clogged, screwing up his HDM, right? I've had it happen. I've totally wrecked meters before because of the condition of the water in the system. So,
But here's a great place where commissioning and tab can work together so well, because you may not have the resources to be on site, but I have a responsibility as a commissioning provider to observe and really, verify that a proper flush and fill has been done for you.
That's where it comes together, right? That's where it comes together.
And when we communicate and I save you a trip, the next thing you know, you're calling me and saying, we got tests scheduled, but the control guy doesn't even have the stuff programmed. We work together that way and help each other and help the project at the same time,
Absolutely.
What about field reports? I mean, are you guys leaving something behind whenever you show up? Or one of my big things is the mystery guy. He shows up, works his ass off, and then I don't know anything that happened for, 3-4 weeks.
Our practice is every guy, every work that all the work that he does every day has a field report behind it. As far as what was accomplished, what was done, and we have, open logs, action item list, efficiency log, whatever you want to call it. And, those are communicated regularly with the person that we're working for, whether it be the owner, or the mechanical contractor. And, that information too, sometimes is not as transparent and open as it should be. Just personal opinion.
No, a lot of times the mechanical will hoard the report and I can't get it from them. What I do a lot when we talk about streamlining, is I want to incorporate your work into my issues resolution log. So it's to the broader team. So you're
Sure.
not buried, that's another way
Sure.
we put together.
Sure. I mean, having a good mechanical contractor that is willing to take on anything that comes down the road and live in a transparent environment and have, solid people at the management level, at the office level, and solid people at the field level that can manage the items and get them resolved and get it communicated to you in a timely manner. That's Disneyland, right? That's the good stuff right there. Like that's right.
I have it in all caps on this presentation somewhere. Let's go to number 4 and see what it says.
Let's
Tell
do
us
it.
about tab verification. You're wanting to do this, I know. That's on the right is a cooling tower. That's the position those dampers are in until hell freezes over right there. They'll never move. And I know that because there's cement in them. So
Yeah.
But tell us about tab verification. And, there's a difference between tab verification and diagnostic testing. It's one thing to verify your tab results, another thing to come in and help troubleshoot a guy's piece of equipment. And talk about that and how that aligns with QC and how in the heck do you get timely resolution?
It's a lot, man. It's a lot. I'm gonna do my best to answer half of that. So, tab verification process is something that, I've had some really good experiences and I've had some negative experiences too. At the end of the day, you got to hold on to a couple key things. One of which is anytime that you verify a system, a component, right? To be fair to the tab contractor, right? We balance it under these said conditions, whether it be, pressure in the duct system, static pressure, differential pressure in a hydronic system. If you have some complicated units that might have some series applications, that might have some DOAS units and some rooftop units and might have stuff like that, we basically need to set up the system in the same way that it was balanced, right? That is like the first and foremost thing that the entire team has to understand when you're doing tab verification, whether if it's with an owner rep, the general contractor, or the commissioning provider, right? We have to acknowledge that and know that that's how we're going to set it up. It can be complicated, especially when you're doing phase work, right? Where maybe the conditions in which you tab verified aren't there anymore, right? And this is kind of like, Jim, when we talked about it in our rehearsal, sometimes there's a real narrow window of opportunity you have to really tab verify the system, because a lot of times, when the tab guy is going through his processes and he's setting up total error on a unit, there's a possibility that unit may never see that condition ever again, or it might be you might have to jump through a tremendous amount of hoops to get it in that place. That's where hopefully you're engaged with the commissioning provider. Hopefully the commissioning provider can say, hey, I understand you're doing this now. I might not have the pencil copy report that I would love to have, but yeah, I'll come down and we'll do the tab verification under this and we can check that box. I think that's an open-minded approach that the team has to have with certain challenges that's faced. Negative experiences with tab verification is not dotting your I's and crossing your T's, not marking damper handles, not using duct traverse readings as compared to registers. If you have OBD dampers and that kind of stuff that you can't set, you can't mark, but they move, right? We know it, right? No manufacturer wants to say they move, but they do. And, those are negative experiences. Those are things that you can do, and how you document the information in your report is valuable. Sometimes taking an extra step to say, hey, that first damper is 50% open. Like, it goes a long way in tab verification, because if you're a commissioning guy and you come up to this and you're like, what's going on here? The damper's wide open. It's got all kind of, what's going on here, right? If you have that little note in your report that says, hey, damper's at 50% open, somebody who's looking at your work and say, oh, okay, well, the damper's not where it was originally for whatever reason. Okay. Put it back
on that report is so important.
Yeah, right. That little stuff there can be a saver for some negative experiences. But overall, I think a tab agency should not shy away from commissioning, not look at it as a negative, look at it as a positive, because when you bring positive energy to a task that you need to do, chances of having success are going to be higher than if you want to be difficult. Oh, it's another commissioning guy. He just, whatever stigmatism, right? So, I'm a big proponent of that. And,
I come out of the tab industry, so I approach these things a little differently. I understand the tabulated columns, but I'm interested when I do tab verification. I want to see the unit at 100% outside air, and then I want to see the unit at minimum and see what the airflow differences are, giving a full load condition, which as you say, it's hard to simulate. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with an air data multimeter and a differential pressure drop across the exterior door and see what kind of pressure your building's under. And then, two, on top of what you said, whether or not all the equipment's being operated and all these other parameters come into play. And you can find those out early if you do macro instead of starting to just do readings right away, which is what I usually do.
Sure.
Normally, a control contractor, a building operator, an energy management guy has come in and he's changed, the way the system operates, reduced the static pressures and that kind of stuff. So you're in trouble. Let's look at,
yeah, go ahead.
you got to stay that. The two things I can say is communicate with the commissioning guy, communicate with the owner if you have that opportunity. If not, you can always talk to the commission guy and he can be the bad guy for you for sure.
Absolutely.
Number 5 is, what tools does American Testing collaborate with the commissioning team to streamline delivery tab services? When you were talking earlier, one of the things I really like to do, there's no reason you can't, you can use cell phones to do this, but if I have a regular commissioning meeting, I'm going to invite the tab guy and I'm going to have a virtual opportunity where he can be on his cell phone on another job in my meeting for whatever it needs to be. There's no reason that can't be functional and can't be done to save your money. If you put money to go to all my meetings in there, power to you, buddy. I'll find stuff for you to do. I'll fill your guys 8-hour day. But that's not the reality we live in. So other thing is using SharePoint and sharing documents, using, collaborative construction software with the whole team. I agree with what you said earlier. Working with good contractors is the key to the whole thing.
Yep. I think when it comes to really successful projects that we've had with commissioning, providing the pencil copy or the preliminary reports too when requested. Sometimes the asks are tough to get done, right? Big projects and getting that information out can be very difficult, very challenging to do. But at the end of the day, finding ways to share that information, check those boxes, allow the commissioning to look at some of the data ahead of time, right, is only going to save time. And then, also as far as the collaboration approach too, a lot of times, Jim, I don't know how you feel about when you do tab verification or how the collaboration goes, but we like to bring in commissioning while we're doing the work, to check as many boxes as possible into, I'm gonna hate to say it, but a lot of times it's competency, right? When you go on a job, let me meet the field guy that's doing the work, and within a few minutes, Jim, you can deny it all you want, but you might know what kind of qualified person you have on a project tab agency.
Yeah. No, that's right.
Do you know what I mean? And I think welcoming it. What can we do to help you? I understand you might have a process, but come out and verify the readings while we're doing some of the work here too, right? We always want to open that opportunity up. We might lose a little bit of time, we might lose a little efficiency, but I think the goodwill of doing that and the welcomeness too, I think goes a long way.
Well, and monitoring tab is part of a commissioning scope. You'll see it in almost every spec or every commissioning plan. I do it. To me, it's an exciting time when the tab guys get on site because I'm going to find out things that, were heretofore not discoverable because of what you're doing. And
Sure.
so that is something I want to engage in. So I agree with you totally on that. Another thing I think too is just the open communication. Just conversation, picking up the phone. If you're on the job and I'm not on the job, call me, tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
5 minutes while you're driving, with hands free can go a long way towards a relationship.
Sure. And tab and commissioning, Jim, we do have a similar goal in mind, right?
We do, which is the same exact thing. The last one of our main questions is, how can commissioning providers and test and balancing engineers optimize tab procedures and streamline communication with design construction teams, deliver enhanced verifiable tab reports. Now, I talk about this, and you just said it. In data center commissioning, I do a lot of presentations on it. And one of the things that I'm really leaning towards in terms of the data center guideline with ASHRAE that we're composing is the fact that the commissioning provider has to integrate with the quality control, quality assurance side of the contractor. Because if we don't, we're going after a lot of the same objectives, we're going after a lot of the same deliverables, and we don't want to produce multiple streams of the same thing. And that occurs, and if you read the article in a tab journal or on the ACG Building Systems Commissioning Guideline, I talk about not duplicating deliverables. Just like you said, we can share physical things like monitor me while I'm doing this work so you don't have as big a burden on verification side. But, you know, at the same time, we can work together to make sure you know, that we're not so we have to agree. Are we going to use the issues resolution log? Are we going to use the quality control commissioning construction software? What vehicles are we going to use to convey this information? And then on top of that, who's going to get it, right? I tell you this, Jeremy, if you put out a 30-page field report, nobody's going to read it, right? You can put out so much information that nobody gives a damn. You know, you got to get the right information to the right people in the right amount.
I think, this is a really good conversation and points. And, you know, we talk about, you know, commissioning software, different protocols, communication methods, information. You talk about field reports, nobody looks at, right? At the end of the day, if we can, you know, in simplest of terms, right, look and assess at equipment at different levels of completion, right? And in the test and the balancing world, you know, we look at in terms of equipment, air handling units, exhaust fans, air terminal units, diffusers. If you can also kind of look at that broad perspective and say, hey, look, I got 75% of my air terminals done on the 5th floor, 25% can't be done because I have issues on my log, right? That also becomes an attention grabber. And everybody can kind of understand that when you talk in terms of that completion. Sometimes you missed a little bit of the details, but sometimes people like to know if you get to the point, right? It's easier to understand information if you can summarize stuff at a level that no matter who you are, you can understand it, right?
Right.
And I like to use the terms of percentages on any said piece of equipment or whatever the process is, because that's what it's about. We're about numbers and equipment. We have so many diffusers, so many air terminals to do on a job, and if you can find a way to summarize it, you know, on the test and the balancing side, you know, commissioning side, you know, Jim, I don't know how you think of it that way, but a lot of times on jobs we think of it in that manner, and it really can be helpful to the process because then it really is relatable to people. Oh, how do we get this on 25% done? You need to read my action list, and then we can get some resolution.
Yeah, I believe you have to have metrics. You in data center commissioning, it's asset management, right? And it's the same thing in test and balance. You have all these assets. Your diffuser count could be wrong by one, you know, that maybe they didn't install a diffuser or something, you know, you get that thing. So I don't know how you survive any kind of a sizable project without some type of software management of what you're doing, both your field report and your status on jobs. Like in data center commissioning, we want both a tracking system where things are tagged, both on hardware, physical equipment, as well as in the software in the spreadsheets, and then they're color coded. A lot of times they use green, red, and yellow. You know, you can kind of self-describe what that is. If all the electrical line is all red, you know where your critical block is on your path, that kind of thing. You guys using a lot of software? Or are you seeing more of it, or what's your thoughts on tab software and what's out there?
We're still an old-fashioned Excel spreadsheets with some code, some macros written for our tab reports. I know there's a lot of products out there. I know that the AI technology and some of that stuff, what it's doing, is really making a lot of headway. I know there's some good platforms out there. I guess my thing with the tab software and just in general is it's a lot of times the the amount of detail and the customization that's needed, right? I think that's ultimately sometimes our limiting factors with software. And maybe why we haven't gone to it yet. I know we've tried some stuff, and we still follow the Excel stuff with some data entry, but
that's software. I mean, you're using,
no, it is. I mean, I think when you say software, I think of more of, your platforms that you're going to see at your conferences, conventions with, some packages. I mean, obviously in the commissioning world, right? I don't think anybody's doing commissioning without some kind of software right now, third-party software.
It's getting more.
And I think from a tab perspective, people that I've talked to, I think it's still a mixed bag. So it kind of depends on who you talk to, but I think it's definitely going in a direction, because once owners, operators of tab firms realize the savings that some of the software can have,
but
just a matter of time.
I can take your Excel spreadsheets and I can import them into CX Planner, and they can become part of my database as well. So
sure.
That is very transportable and not a bad way to do business. And
okay.
And balance are not the same, but there's a mixed bag out there. Let's do a bonus question. What do you say?
Let's go for it. It's bonus time.
This is a ringer for you. Tell me what's the difference between total system balance and, I got a little typo there, and a typical tab agency versus an AABC. You've mentioned some of the highlights, independence and so forth. Tell us your perspective. Promote AABC.
When it comes to total system balance, an agency, right, you're gonna get a product that is all encompassing, right? When you use the words total, right, that starts what encompassing what you get, right? One of the biggest hangups that a lot of times that test and balance agencies, I feel like, miss out on could be like a simple detail with a static pressure profile, right? And a true static pressure profile, and as rudimentary as it sounds, it is the absolute, like, if you want to talk about your personal health and your lifeblood of your health, like your blood pressure or whatever is one of your big ones, like static pressure profile of a system is like in my mind, is like the lifeblood of a system.
Yeah, but if you get a static pressure profile and you can't derive the total static pressure from it, what good is it, right?
Exactly. But the pressure drops across each component is super, super valuable. It's a timestamp. It's once again, I use the word potential, right? It lets you know what the potential of the system is. And, that's one little thing you're going to get with total system balance. Independence is another, obviously, cornerstone of total system balance. And, when it comes to total system balance, I mean, we are talking about, how our reports are organized, and I could go on and on about it, but the ABC, providers, we talk in terms of systems. We talk in terms of formatting and ways that the data is also presented. That is, I don't want to say the easiest to interpret, but it's not just a bunch of pages. It has purpose behind it, and I think that's a value you're going to get with total system balance as well.
I'll tell you what I like a lot, if it's still being done, and I'm sure it is there's a hydronic checklist and a airside checklist for preliminary checkout on your tab project, whether it's ready or not.
Sure.
That's a really good
system or tab readiness checklists are huge, right? Once again, other things that we've done, connecting the startup on equipment and commissioning of equipment, is sometimes getting some points, getting some details before a system's ready to be turned over to us, right? Is an air terminal unit, right? Pick up a couple points. Hey, what's the damper position? What's the air terminal reading, right? Those 2 points in itself can tell you a lot about how the system's performing. And that falls into the readiness checklist, where you can go through with the contractor. Hey, if all my dampers are 100% open and I'm not reading any airflow, ding, 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 warning, we got a problem here. We're not balancing this until you get this resolved, right? Presumably you want the boxes, the terminal units under control. That's where you really go into a steady state that you can have success balancing if a lot of those things are vetted out ahead of time, and the tab readiness checks gives you that ability to vet it out.
Here's where I want that on the field report too. You don't have static pressure control on your VAV air handling system, and you can't balance it. Boy, I really want to see that field report,
Exactly.
We're getting towards the last 10. I'm going to skip through the other 3 bonus questions, and ask you if you got anything, mind-boggling that you want to share before we turn it over to Cassie and see what kind of questions we got. If we don't have a lot of questions, we'll go back and pick up the bonuses. But tell me your great insight of this whole tab talk. What's your takeaway?
I think my takeaway is about overcoming adversity, obstacles, and learning from experiences that you have, and how to apply them to the next, and then how to share that information with others too. I think that's what this is about here. We're talking about some of our experiences, practices, right? Some of the stuff we're talking about, Jim, is not in any kind of manual here, right? This is a real person webinar on experiences, perspectives. Whether you've seen the perspective, understand it, not, hopefully people can relate that are on the call here with us, and can attend more tab talks. And if you're not an AABC member, become an AABC member, commissioning provider for ACG. So it's all good stuff. And don't forget to come to the AABC annual meeting next month in Amelia Island, Florida.
That's going to be fun.
I'll be there.
It's about relationships, right? You have to communicate, talk to people. Everybody has a full plate and they have a perspective, and we're all busy, and it's really easy to just get caught up in our own piece of it. In just frankness, Jeremy, a lot of times the biggest issue I have with tab vendors when they come on site is they're above it all. Everybody is just dumb and they've done all this, and here we are, now I have to fix it. And you come on a job with an attitude like that, it's really hard to get cooperation. And you have to be human and treat others human. And I think that's where it all begins. And when you look at the bad jobs and the one that's broke down, it's because the people have soured their relationships,
Humility, right? Humility
Right.
is the first word that I think of when you describe that, humility.
No, exactly. So Cassie, if you want to come on and let us know if we got any questions, or we'll move on this.
Yeah, we've got a couple questions in the Q&A. This one says, what are key points to look at in a tab report to understand that the report is legit or was created while sitting on a bar stool?
I have some good answers, but you're the one that's putting it out there.
Well, I appreciate that's the old rhetoric, or whatever you want to call it, right? Was the job done at the bar, right? Looking at a tab report, right? Hopefully we have, initial and final values documented for certain types of testing, right? Diffusers, right? That's one of the things too. Depending on the type of job you are looking at, right? Magnitude is one factor. But Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but any kind of a major project, moderate to major test and balancing project of more than let's say 50,000 square feet, 50,000 square feet, I think that there's comments about the tab process that somebody might not like, and it still might be deficient or outstanding or not perfect, right? A perfect balancer report, perfect, is one of those things that I would look at and be like, what's going on here? Another thing you look at too, as far as looking at a balancer report, is the relationship between CFM and static pressure, right? That relationship is a real number. It's a real relationship that with a intuitive mind, you can look at it compared to a fan curve. Hey, how is this thing actually performing? Is this thing on the curve? Is the brake horsepower good? Like that's a devil in the detail that really is an internal check and balance. Looking at K factors, right, on terminal units or airflow monitoring stations, if the K factors aren't unique, if all of them seem to be the same, that's a flag for me, because the K factors for field conditions are not the same as the factory. They're not all going to be the same. That's another thing that I would look at and see.
Two things I'm looking at, right off the bat, I'm going to say, are all the values exact? If I'm looking for 500, am I getting 500 all the time? And then I'm going to think about what type of equipment was the technician using. If it was an analog hood, which you don't see very much, they could be in increments of 5 and 10. But if it's a digital, which most equipment is, then you'd want to see, a variety of values around the plus or minus, which is usually 10% of it. And, I'm looking for something big too. Like, I know as the commissioning provider, designers should know this too, where they've made changes, right? They couldn't fit the sixth large circular diffuser into the auditorium So they went with 5. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go look at that tab report, which that's a system that you might not have been able to get on those diffusers to begin with. And are they showing 5 or 6 diffusers there? Right away, I know what are these guys doing. So that's a couple things I'm looking at. What do you got next, Cassie?
All right, this next question says, regarding tab verification, it sounds like there are 2 approaches to it. The first for the CxP to observe the tab procedure during fieldwork for compliance with industry standards and specification. The second for the CxP to ask the tab person to duplicate some of the readings from the tab report after it is submitted. Which approach do you think has a more positive impact on project quality, or should it be a combination of both?
Well, it's going to be a combination of both, but it's really going to be what the specification requires, Jeremy.
That is a consideration. However, you know, in certain situations, massive situations, we did tab verification on a reheat coil system that the average GPM was 1 GPM per coil. Okay, and we had 800 devices spread over 5 floors with a combination of manual balancing valves and PIC valves.
And what valve?
Took PIC, you know, a pressure independent control valves.
Gotcha,
okay?
gotcha.
So it took about a week of time to get the controls guy, because he only had control of about, I think about 80% of the valves he could open. The other 20% had to be opened manually. The system was full of air. The system was full of debris. Getting the place to a system where we balanced it, 4 passes through the system, 20% of the system had to be checked, and the repeatability had to be within 5%. Right? That was that's my story for the day. But that was an extreme situation that the commissioning guy had to come in as we were doing it, because from a time sake and efficiency and an effort, it was the right move to make. If you're doing smaller stuff, rooftop unit stuff, constant volume stuff, obviously it's a whole other level. But for me, it really depends on the circumstance and what you're looking to tab verify.
What I'm usually going to see, whether it's a specification, ACG commissioning guideline, or just a commissioning plan, is tab monitoring is a part of the commissioning scope of services. And the tab should be observed by the commissioning provider unless it's excluded from their services. That doesn't mean they sit there every moment, but it does mean at the very least they're keeping tabs on, or keeping track of, you know, what work is being accomplished, what are the setbacks. And again, a lot of times the mechanical contractor is not going to issue that field report to me. So if I'm on site or have a technician on site talking to them, I can get that information by doing that, whereas I'll be in the dark otherwise. But typically, as far as the test and balance is concerned, they're obligated not to my monitoring them while they're performing their services. They're obligated to the verification of their tabulated results at the end based on the commissioning or based on the design engineer's approval. And it's usually the designer that you're going to demonstrate for. Sometimes he delegates that to the commissioning provider, but it's the design authority who's going to really do the tab verification. And really, my participation as a commissioning provider is going to be as much to make sure that things are fair to the tab contractor as to the designer. For example, I don't want someone showing up with a piece of equipment that wasn't used to do the job. I want the same calibrated equipment that was used on the project. I'd prefer to have the same technicians there because they know where all the bodies were left, you know. So some of those things are really important, and I can help in that.
Well said, Jim.
Else, Kathy.
All right, we've got time for one more. So I will do, let's see, this one says, what are some key considerations when coordinating tab activities with other trades, such as controls, mechanical contractors, to minimize delays?
I think that's specific to the TSB side of it. Because if I look in, one of the things it says is the TSB agency shall interface with the mechanical, electrical controls, and other specialty contractors, which you would definitely have to have the general involved in that too. How are you accomplishing that?
You know, you're doing it through a multitude of ways. I think understanding the flow and how the building is being built can be a huge factor with this too, and taking advantage of opportunities that you do have to test and balance certain parts of the building. with the controls contractor. Does he have control of the valve? Does he not? How do we get valves open? Right? Is there fire alarm testing going on, Jim? Right? I mean, that's, are we doing stairwell pressurization tests? It can, how do we lock down the stairwells? Are we doing this stuff at night? How, I mean, ideally, everybody should be done their work 100% when we are in a building. But Jim, as you know, I mean, that's not always the case. So
well,
how that impacts each other is, it can be, very challenging.
NFPA 3 now has a fire protection commissioning agent. I don't know if you've come across this yet.
No, I haven't. No.
And then they're responsible for validating pressure drops. Now get this, this used to kill me when I was in the field. They want a pressure drop across a smoke pickup, right? Well, there's no pressure drop across a rod in a duct, right? But they have a minimum pressure drop that they require. So there are times when you could end up having an interface with a guy like this fire protection commissioning agent that's required by code in most jurisdictions. So it's interesting, and you should be prepared to talk to your guys about, where are fire alarms or fire smoke detectors required and where are they not, above or below 2000 CFM, and all that kind of stuff is important for, here's a really good example of where tab guys are right in the thick of code,
Yeah, absolutely.
So Cassie, I guess that's ready for a wrap now.
Yes, sir. That is a wrap for today's webinar. Thank you, Jeremy and Jim, for an awesome discussion. This was a great presentation. And thanks also to CxPlanner for supporting and sponsoring today. And finally, thanks to everyone for joining us. We hope you found this session insightful and full of takeaways you can bring back to your own work. A couple of reminders. The ACG Building Systems Commissioning Guideline is a growing document, and the Guideline Committee is seeking writers and peer reviewers to contribute to Part 2, applying the commissioning process to specific building systems. If you're interested in contributing to the guideline as part of that committee, you can contact me at publications@commissioning.org. We also want to let you know that the call for abstracts is open for CX Energy 2026, which will be taking place April 21st to 24th in Chicago. If you've got an idea for a presentation, we want to hear from you. You can submit your abstracts at cxenergy.com. And finally, as Jeremy mentioned, we cannot wait to celebrate 60 years of excellence of AABC at the 2025 AABC annual meeting in Amelia Island, Florida. Join us October 22nd through 24th for ocean views, networking, and expert insights from the top professionals in testing and balancing. Mark your calendars. You will not want to miss this one. You can learn more about that at aabc.com. Thanks so much.